So I would like to welcome everyone to this month's AGU Heads and Chairs webinar, sponsored both by AGU and AGI. This is a bit different approach. We've done this a couple times where it's really actually a discussion that we're trying to facilitate among all of our participants, and very similar to the December AGU Heads and Chairs meeting. This month, the topic is best practices to boost enrollments while maintaining academic rigor. What I'd like to do, though, first is introduce my other partners in crime here. Pranoti Asher, who's manager of higher education and is both at AGU and AGI scholar and resident. And then myself, I'm Christopher Keene. I'm director of Geoscience Profession Higher Education at AGI. And Leila Gonzalez, who is technical specialist here at AGI, is also on helping moderate and manage the meeting. So I hope everybody to get a chance to get a few of those lead-on questions. I'd like to go ahead and kick this off in a conversation and poll the group, and please unmute yourself and respond. If anyone here has been part of the Summit of Undergraduate Education efforts that Sharon Mosier at University of Texas was leading, and participated in doing a reform effort and then writing up a case, sort of a case study on it and what your responses were, because so much of that is actually about improving our enrollment while maintaining the quality and even increasing the quality. So I'm wondering if folks out there, anyone happens to have been part of that process.
Ali El-Shazli. I was part of that process several years ago, about maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And what was it that you ended up doing, and what were the nature of your the results?
At the time, I was the department chair. Carried out several curricular changes, including introducing a new introductory class on geological hazards, and changing the curriculum in a number of other ways. We haven't seen that much of an improvement in our numbers since, however, and that concerns me quite a bit. I'm no longer the chair, but that concerns me quite a bit.
Do you feel your program became stronger? I mean, maybe not in the total number of students, but do you feel that the overall curriculum program became stronger with those changes?
Well, we have not. One of the issues that were discussed was the matrix and the scaffolding. We did not implement that, but one of the things that came out of that meeting was switching out chemistry 2 for geochemistry, physics 2 for geophysics to improve enrollment. That has happened. So our numbers have improved in the upper division classes. I also have a feeling that the students really welcome this change. They'd rather take classes in our department as opposed to other departments. But as far as the other side of the coin, which is trying to recruit more into the major, that has not happened.
Okay.
Our numbers have remained the same.
Okay, so but they're steady though.
Yeah, they are steady, but the administration doesn't like that.
Of course. Anyone else have experiences, working on the reform efforts coming out of those summits? So while waiting on that, so Ali, I actually have a question to follow up with you. So one of the other big issues is the institutional priorities in sort of recruitment and target numbers. You said you're staying steady, but the institution's not happy about that. What are their overall recruitment and enrollment goals right now? Is it just more the merrier, or are they looking for specific populations?
More the merrier. They're unclear. A lot of this has materialized in a way that we've had one retirement. We've had one other resignation in a very small department. And so in attempting to replace those tenure track positions, the administration was very reluctant to do that. And the most we could get was a 1-year temporary or a 3-year temporary for those two particular. We're extremely fortunate to be back in full force with all 4 of us. But the fact that, it's 3-year temporary or 1-year temporary is not satisfactory. The administration itself is unclear as to what the goals are. They keep telling us, well, we ask them, what is the healthy number? What number do you want? And they don't want to give a specific number, but we are at around 30. We've always been at around 30 majors in the department. And after really pressing very hard, they said, well, you need to be about 50 majors. And this at a time when the university itself is not really increasing enrollment. So it's a little bit frustrating.
So I'll put this out to the entire group. What is your institution's enrollment strategy or targets? Sort of the same question is, do you have is your institution looking for just more numbers? Or are they looking for specific populations? And I think the other thing, one of the points that's being brought up quite frequently is concern about a bit of a demographic downward pressure here starting in a couple years that folks are expecting for new entries into university. Combined also right now, we're sort of seeing feast or famine. We're hearing schools either are way undershooting their total actual matriculation rates or way overshooting, based on their normal estimates. And so I'm curious if some other folks can talk about their institutions' targets and goals there.
This is Chris Madsen from Central Washington University. Our university's enrollment strategy is basically being driven by the budget. We've switched over to a new budgeting model called RCM. It's basically sort of a business type model where budgets are based on student enrollments. And so they pretty much projected the budget out and figured out the number of students that they want rather than considering the number that's maybe appropriate to the institution. And so they want to see rather significant growth in order to make the budget numbers match up. That's the case here.
Interesting. Okay. And what are they seeing in sort of your current actual matriculation situation? I mean, I know they all have targets. Are they sort of overshooting or undershooting right now?
At the university level, they're fairly close to the number that they want. Our numbers have fluctuated up and down. We're in a little bit of a downtrend at the moment. We're showing some signs that that's turning around, but it's going to take a few years to get back up to a healthier level.
Okay, sounds good. Anyone else want to chime in? Do we have anybody from some liberal arts colleges? Because I think that would be interesting to hear.
Hello, Chris. This is Lee Fall at SUNY Oneonta.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what our enrollment plan is because we actually we have a new president she's on her second year, and we have a new provost this year. So our enrollments have been growing. They've been letting more and more freshmen in, but that's because the state budget has decreased over time, and we're pretty much looking at a flat budget over the next 2 or 3 years. So our enrollments need to stay constant. That's college. The overall college enrollments need to stay constant. I'm the department chair of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences, and our enrollments actually have gone down. We have been pretty good about holding around 40 to 50, and we are down to 25 this year. So we are graduating a lot of people. We're not getting any new students. The provost is planning a benchmarking study because since she's new to the campus, she wants to do this, hire this outside firm to run the study to figure out kind of what the campus should be like. And I guess after that, we'll find out from her what what her ideas are on the way the campus should be going. She definitely said she is for the liberal arts side, and she does not want to get rid of anybody or any of the departments because it's important for liberal arts education. So we're kind of in this unique situation where we're not quite sure where we're going. But I do know for the geology major, we have lost quite a few students, and we're not quite sure how we're going to get that back up.
Okay. Anybody else?
Hey, Chris, this is Steve Holbrook. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I feel like I should probably jump in since I'm from Virginia Tech, and we're probably at one extreme of enrollments. And some of you may even have heard about the massive over-enrollment that we experienced this year. There were some articles in the Washington Post about it and so forth. So at the university level, our admissions office rolled over new people in the last year or two, and they instituted a new admissions model, a holistic model this past year. It clearly wasn't calibrated properly, and we wound up with having targeted 6,600 new freshmen, incoming freshmen, and ended up with closer to 7,700. So overshooting by more than 1,000 new freshmen, which has caused us to have to, rent entire hotels for the year and all that kind of thing. So why that happened is still no one's really saying. The spin that's coming out of the university is along the lines of everybody's liking Virginia Tech because of the Amazon HQ2 campus and our new things in the DC area. I'm not sure if I believe that myself. Those now in our department in Geosciences, the trends have been different. And I've been here in my third year now, and we had been in a trend of declining enrollments, actually quite alarming. 3 or 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we were at 110, 115 majors. Last year, we were down to 65. This year, we're up. We also had our own freshman surge. So we're up to 83, and we're hoping that is not a blip, but will become a trend.
Excellent. So what, Steve, so what has there been any, other than just more freshmen, has there been any impact, in your classes or in other parts of the university about sort of maintaining quality and everything with so many more students now?
Yeah, Chris, it's been quite an effort here, especially in the College of Science where our department resides, because all of those freshmen need to take math and chemistry and physics. And so, for example, the math department had to hire 20 new math instructors, not tenure line faculty, but instructors in a several week period in the summer, just to have staffing to run all those classes. So there have been lots of implications at different parts of the university for getting the teaching staffed, and I think everybody stepped up. So it's actually the freshman experience seems like it's pretty good in terms of, we're not having to teach night classes and Saturday classes. We're using more of the day. There are more 8 a.m. classes and that sort of thing. It hasn't impacted our department very much because we don't teach. Our enrollments are up in our service classes, our physical geology, hazards, resources. Those classes have definitely expanded enrollments this year, but we had capacity to grow and cover that. So it's been actually a blessing for us.
No, very good. Anybody else have any perspectives?
Hi, this is Carol Pride from Savannah State University.
Yep.
And public, small HBCU, and we've had overall declining enrollment the past 2 to 3 years. Our marine science program has continued to grow slightly, but we're heavy on the freshman side of things, and so our struggle will be to retain students in the major.
And how does that
The
compare to
rates
your,
haven't changed that much.
okay, and how does that compare for the institutional framework?
It's comparable.
Okay.
Lower retention, getting through the 4 years.
Anybody else want to share on this?
Yeah, this is Sally Sutton at Colorado State University. And our institutional strategy, to the extent that one can decipher it, has been to target recruitment of out-of-state students from a handful of states and to develop recruitment relationships in those states. And beyond that, the institution has managed to improve overall retention. So the institution so far has continued to grow year over year. Our geology major, on the other hand, peaked 5 years ago at 180 students. We're currently down to 110. And true freshmen, we have a total of 6.
So are you finding then, I mean, so have your majors traditionally come in as majors in geo, or are they coming in from the intro classes and transferring in?
It's a combination. And in fact, we have a fairly high rate of transfer students, external transfer students who come into the major from community colleges. Numbers are down for those as well. But overall, we've probably got 16 or 17 new students, new to the major students this year. So we're clearly continuing to fall.
Any other comments on this question? Okay, so I'm gonna then, we're sort of gonna circle around on this. So the other question is, do you have a process in your within your program to evaluate the rigor of it, and any kind of formal process using external review committee, maybe just the faculty, maybe using the fundamentals of geology exam or some metric? And is there a frequency on this? And have you done anything recently that you believe is improving the rigor of the course of study, and what has that impact been enrollments and student retention and issues like that? And Steve Holberg, I'm going to call you out, since I know you've been looking hard at your program, and wonder if you have some comments.
Okay, sure, Chris. Well, so not really on the question that you just asked. I mean, as I think we just went through a complete curriculum revision process last year in our department. It was one of the things that when I arrived here was clearly something that needed to be done because the curriculum hadn't been. I mean, it reminded me of the curriculum that I had at Penn State, from which I graduated in 1982. And I don't think it had been changed in about that long. So we successfully went through that process. I'm happy to talk about what we did and how we did it, and some of the, the ways that we did it, which are a little different from say the CERC UT kind of Dave Moak model. But that's not the question you asked. We haven't really adopted some metric of rigor at this stage. We've been more concerned about just getting a new curriculum in place.
So do you feel, I mean, just, completely, subjectively, do you feel that where you're moving is actually a not just a more modern curriculum, but, perhaps stronger? Or do you think it's about the same, just in a different direction?
I think so. Our goals in revising the curriculum were to make it more flexible, to make it easier to navigate. We have by far the highest, the longest time to degree in the College of Science, 4.9 years, and most of the other majors, psychology, chemistry, math, physics, you name it, were down around 4.0, 4.1. So we had a rat's nest of prerequisites that were problematic. So we wanted to make it more flexible. We wanted easier to navigate. We wanted to make it better aligned to obvious career paths, and we wanted to make it more skills based than content based. So those were sort of our principles in moving forward. And the reason I was interested in this webinar today, of course, when you do this, one of the points of discussion naturally becomes balancing the question of maintaining rigor with all these other things, like making it more flexible, and some of the practical concerns about, we were losing majors. And I think one of the reasons we were losing majors is because we had one of the most rigorous curricula in the college. The full year of the hard calculus, full year of the hard physics, full year of chemistry, full year of biology. And we would often lose students to other majors like forestry, fish and wildlife, geography that didn't have quite as rigorous a curriculum. And so there was a practical consideration there. So, I think in a nutshell, I feel like our previous curriculum was designed to prepare students for graduate school, and it was very good at that. But I did a pretty detailed analysis of our alumni and where our students go, and only about a third of them actually went straight from Virginia Tech to grad school. So I felt, and the faculty ultimately felt, that we weren't serving about 2/3 of our graduates because they just wanted to get a job. So we have now, instead of the original 4 options, we have 6. We added 2 new options, and some of those options are, I don't know if I want to say less rigorous. I think that's a loaded word, but they're less focused on the math and the physics. They're more flexible. They have other things in them, other skills-based requirements. So and then some of our options, like geophysics, is just as rigorous and hard as it's ever been, because you kind of have to go up through differential equations if you're going to do a geophysics degree. So I think we have a broader menu, and I don't think it's fair to just say that it used to be rigorous and now it's not. I think what it is a curriculum that's going to serve a broader diversity of the students that are interested in earth science. Anyone
else have any programs or comments on the issue of sort of measuring, quote unquote, the rigor or the intensity or the robustness of your academic program? Simplify the question. Are you finding, is that part of your periodic reviews that you might be doing with external review committees, for instance?
Hi, this is Petra Deegans. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I'm just going to follow up on the previous person, because we did a major program revision. Sorry, I'm at San Francisco State University, and we have a pretty small department, and have also seen a decrease in majors over the last few years. We did a pretty major curriculum revision a few years ago, and now are about to undergo a program review that's sort of university mandated to try to sort of assess where we're at. But I was interested to hear if other people had, so one of the challenges with doing curriculum revision and changing it from being less traditional to maybe being more modern is there's sometimes resistance within the department. I'm guessing I'm not the only one who's experienced that. And I'm sort of wondering if other people that have seen a decrease in enrollment, has there been a curriculum revision association with that, or is this trend towards decreased enrollment in the geosciences, is it a national trend? I'm just wondering what the scope of the challenges are.
Anyone like to respond?
This is Sally Sutton at Colorado State again. Our general impression in this corner of the country is that this is an overall trend. It's independent of curricular changes. We made one modest change in our program a couple of years ago. We now allow students to complete algebra-based physics rather than calculus-based physics. It's made no difference. We're looking at a larger scale overhaul, but we really haven't figured out how to do it while retaining the rigor that we think is appropriate.
Yeah, so I think that's the challenge that we're facing, is that we did the curriculum revision. We tried to maintain the rigor, but do as Stephen said, which is to increase the flexibility, to try to create different pathways so that students with slightly different interests can see, a place for themselves. But the enrollment has continued to go down. And so, which really, brings it back to recruitment. So at San Francisco State, most of our students are first generation college students. They're mostly paying their own way through college. And so they mostly do not come in as freshmen. They mostly come in as transfer students, or we get them through our lower division GE classes. But it's it's a trickle. it's not enough. And so I would really love to hear ideas from people about how do we recruit? How do we go out? And as I often feel like part of the challenge is there's not a lot of earth science, and I don't think in any state really in the K through 12 system. And so people come out of high school and they can picture themselves becoming a doctor or a lawyer. In California, there's now environmental science. And so the environmental science program in the geography department is doing great, but they don't see the connection to earth sciences. And so I'm hoping to get ideas on how do we go out and get students to come to our programs.
Anyone have some comments on that?
This is Chris Madsen at Central Washington University again. One of the things that we're doing, we also get a very large share of our students from transfers. And so one of our members of our department has actually gone and visited a lot of the community colleges and started to make some personal connections with the individual instructors there. One of the challenges we face is students are interested, but actually getting them to commit to relocating to come to Central, even if it's not a huge distance. A lot of them, I think, are going to those community colleges because they want to stay right in their community. The other thing that we've been able to benefit from is we have a pretty large number of our graduates from our master's program who are now instructors at various community colleges. And so that gives an opportunity to encourage students to come into our program.
Any other comments?
I'll just throw out there that in Georgia, like was mentioned earlier, they really only required to take geoscience in the 6th grade. This is Carol Pride at Savannah State. And we were excited when our university got the education program renewed, because we thought that would open the doors for us to teach more geoscience courses to the future teachers. So at a minimum, they could teach that 6th grader science like rock stars, but a middle grade certification requires, one watered down course where astronomy, geology, meteorology, and oceanography are all combined into one semester, along with instructional techniques. And so it's hard to break in that way too.
So do you find that, in your sense, obviously not having that exposure is going to be a drawdown on them taking coming in as a major. Do you feel that there's a drag on them taking an intro course, for instance, if they have a science distribution requirement?
We don't have trouble with that. We do get decent number taking marine science or environmental science just to fulfill their science requirements, but few ever transfer to our majors.
Okay.
So Chris, this is Steve Holbrook again. I just thought I would weigh in on the recruitment question, because I think it's a really important one. My experience both at my previous institution, University of Wyoming, and here at Virginia Tech is, in a research intensive department, we spend a lot of effort and time recruiting into our graduate program. We fly students in, we're emailing with them, we're sending them our reprints, we're talking to them on the phone. But we typically do nothing at the undergraduate level. I mean, literally nothing. It's just whoever shows up. We're just like, great, happy to see you. So what we're trying to do now at Virginia Tech, because of the declining enrollments that we had, is to try to do everything. I mean, there are a lot of dimensions, and we're not doing everything all at once, of course, that's not possible, but we're getting the right committees. My philosophy of leadership in the department is that the important work of the department gets done by committees, and when they do that work, I respect their work and don't ignore it or do something different. So we have committees, the the PR committee is redoing the website so that it's very clear when someone comes and lands on our page what careers in geoscience look like and how they can train for it. We're working with our current students, our current undergrads, to go back to their high schools with them, because this was an idea that came from our undergrads, actually. Going to high schools is kind of a daunting thing because there are just so many high schools, and where do you start and how do you know you're not wasting your time? But so the way that we've decided to tackle it is to go back to high schools with an enthusiastic undergrad who's happy to go back to her high school and coordinate with teachers there to do a program. We haven't done this yet, but we have 2 students that have volunteered to do this, so we're working on that. So going to high schools, we've been visiting community colleges, trying to make that. We're a land grant, so I feel like it's a big part of our mission and access and affordability that we should be catering to transfer students. So we're working on that by partnering with community colleges around the state. And another big one is to try to make sure that we're getting the right instructors in front of the big classes, because we also get a lot of our majors in from the side, not as entering freshmen. We're still largely a discovered major. So I think it's really important to use those big service classes to talk about the careers that are available, because a lot of people just think geology and they think, oh, it's just like you collect rocks, right? That's not too interesting. They don't really have a broad view of it. So just kind of getting the word out across all of the dimensions is what we're starting to do, and I hope it'll pay off for us.
Any Bells have some insights. So I'll pose a question. I mean, it sounds in general that folks are doing okay with retention inside the major. I wanted to see if that really is an accurate perception, particularly hearing the idea offering suddenly algebra-based physics, and you didn't see a real change in the recruitment. Are you encountering inflection points where students are perhaps leaving the major, and what those factors are? I know years ago, back in the late 90s, when AGI was collecting data by each year of a major, that we saw a pretty big exodus right before field camp, and there was some push that was a disruptive function. But I'm curious if folks have any patterns whether they're just really retaining the majors once they're in, or do you see certain inflection points where you're losing them?
Sally Sutton again at Colorado State. I'd say that we do not lose them once they get past mineralogy. Mineralogy, I would identify as an inflection point.
Why do you think?
Pardon?
Why do you think that is?
My general impression is that some of the students have not really understood up to that point that this is a science. It's not fluff. And the rigor that's demanded in the mineralogy course puts them off.
That's interesting.
This is Chris Madsen at Central Washington University. One of our inflection points is we have a class that follows after intro. It's sort of a historical geology class, but the way we've done it in the past is it's a pretty major skills development class. So working with cross sections, doing a lot of different things, and it's a pretty big step up in the workload. And it seems over the last several years, with the changing student demographic we're getting at the university, students are struggling a lot more with making that step up in expectations, even though it's not necessarily a strong intellectual step up, just in terms of the workload and staying on top of it. We also just anecdotally are noticing we have more students working more hours and jobs outside of school, and balancing that with their lab requirements. So that's been one thing that we're currently looking at, breaking that class up and reallocating those units in a different way to help with that. Regarding the comment about other areas, we've noticed in some cases physics has been a challenge. Physics and calculus have been challenges for our students. In some cases, resulting in them switching to one of our other majors. We also have a BA major that doesn't require that, or in some cases switching out of our major into an environmental studies degree. And then we do have a few students who do struggle with field camp. Mostly what we've noticed is this has been more of a physical fitness issue. And again, that seems to be something that has been a change compared to where things were some years in the past.
Interesting. Any other observations? Okay. So thinking, Michael, just where you're talking about sort of the changing in the nature of the students. As you talk to colleagues in other science departments on your campus, do they have the same kinds of observations in the, shall we say, the grit and intensity and as well as the set of other external challenges in their students, or is this something more aligned with who geology is attracting in the end?
I haven't actually talked in detail with my colleagues in other departments about this. I do know we do have some statistics related to the very large number of students who are coming in now with a high school GPA below 3 or having a college GPA below 2. We have a lot of first generation college students, and one of the responses of the university following the 2008 financial drop and a huge cut in state support was basically to try and make up for that by bringing more and more students in the door. So there has been a change in the level of preparation overall, but I haven't talked in detail with my colleagues in other departments about that.
Okay. As anyone else, I can say that in my conversations with the physics community, with like the Society of Physics students and APS and others, they actually seem to express, certainly in the quantitative skills area, the same concerns we do. I know as a community, they've started developing sort of advanced math for physics students. I mean, not something that I would have expected that physics students would be a bit math phobic, but so they're finding some of those, sort of those hard, quote unquote, hard skill classes or whatever, a challenge to get them through. And I'm curious if other folks have had conversations on their campus, if seeing similar kinds of patterns that you are within your own department. Pranoti, hopefully you can unmute for a minute, because I'm going to put you on the spot from your time at Georgia Southern when you and Dallas are involved, with that department going through such a major reform and increase in majors and everything. How did that change of the program sort of reflect, and how did that compare to other science departments on your campus at the time?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So what we were doing at that time was basically some of the things that, Steve and others have alluded to, put the best faculty in those intro classes, have sort of a marketing plan to sort of do outreach, at the mall or, with high schools, and then work with our faculty who are teaching the teacher prep courses. So we were doing all those things, and sometimes many of those things were happening concurrently. So our issue was, for most of our students came from our intro classes. So that was observed by all the faculty who were teaching intro classes. For example, I remember about 10% of my intro class, I was able to get them to come into the next class, whether it was historical geology or oceanography or whatever have you. We got a lot of folks from biology when the faculty in biology were, when they started getting students in their upper division classes, and they knew that they just couldn't take on any more research courses, they would send their students to geology, saying, hey, why don't you go take a paleontology course or whatever. And then we would find some of those biology students who were churning over to geology. So as a result, these students didn't graduate, within 4 years or 5 years. Some of these students were taking 6 years to graduate. But it was just a combination of a lot of things, students spilling from biology, all our recruitment efforts in geology. And also we were a combined geology and geography program, and our GIS program was really taking off. And so there were students who were coming in taking GIS courses from the business school and other schools on campus. So there was a lot of interest in that. And so we also created a minor in GIS, and that also helped recruit students into the department. So I remember we went from having 20 students when I first got there. We made it to over 100 students over a very short period of time.
Excellent.
Can I follow up on Pranati's point about getting the biology students? This is Kent Ratajewski at University of Kentucky. I'm wondering how she, was able to do that. What were your strategies to pull these biology students into geology? Can you be more specific?
Yeah, sure. So I think from what I haven't been a faculty in nearly a decade, so I don't remember the nuances of every little thing that we did. But I do know that the ecology students, the field biology types, they were required to take 1 or 2 geology courses. And so I think it was probably conversations between the department heads to say, like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, kind of thing. So there was sort of a nice symbiosis between those departments. We also were using the big biology lecture hall, for one of our intro courses. So that kind of gave geology a lot more visibility in the biology building. Biology had their own building. We didn't have our own building. We were housed with other departments in a different building. So I think it was that we had, sort of regular seminar series. We just had a lot of visibility on the campus because of, the marketing efforts. We were trying to get stories about our alumni or stories about what faculty were doing into the nice fancy sort of marketing brochures about the university and such. So I think it was sort of the whole ecosystem of things that we were doing that kind of helped it, in addition to some of the specific things that we did with the biology folks. And again, the paleontology course was very popular with the students who were studying, zoology and doing field work. Not so much with the students who were doing microbiology.
Any other comments on this topic? Okay. In the last few minutes here, I want to just open up if there are specific questions that folks wanted to pose to the group related to this general topic of boosting enrollment and maintaining program quality. So anyone have a question or a comment or a story that they'd like to share these last few moments?
Hi, Chris. This is Ali Al-Shazli again, and I have a specific question on the role of such classes like geologic hazards. That was intended to really be a major draw into our major. And we've been having here at Marshall University, we've been having a hard time even filling that class. It hasn't really worked for us at all. And there is now a question, well, let's switch over to something like geology of national parks, which I'm not very keen on. I don't think that will necessarily be a major draw. So, I mean, I was wondering if others could perhaps comment on a similar experience.
This is Chris Madsen at Central Washington University. So we've experienced some pretty major enrollment drops, especially this year in our introductory classes, because there's been a major change in the general education program that has reduced the science requirements overall, and there's no longer really a formal lab science requirement. That was what attracted a lot of students into our introductory geology class. But another factor has been when I first started here, we didn't have any problems filling any of our intro classes, and the university advisors operated on what had been termed a block registration system. So in other words, they would just slot students into kind of a particular lineup for their first quarter. And I think they did a good job making sure that classes filled. And so now it's really driven by the student. And so if they don't know to search for a geology class in the computer system that they use to register, then they're not going to even see that it's there. So I don't know if there's any of those factors relevant in your case in terms of general education competition. In other words, who's competing with you in that same category. Because one of our classes that had been dealing with, we used to have a geologic hazard class. We scrapped it because we realized, well, some of that's covered in just our regular intro geology class, and we wanted to have an energy and resources class, and we thought that would reach some more people, but it turned out to be in the same general education category and as a very popular nutrition class. And because the students can't take more than one class from a department in each category, if they wanted to take that other class, then we would lose out on the enrollment. So I don't know if any of those factors are relevant in your case.
Yes, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I agree with you. We've had a similar situation for our general introductory classes, an overall decline because of a change in the gen ed requirements. But I thought that we could actually reverse the trend with something like a topic like geologic hazards, and it's actually called geologic hazards and earth resources. But it hasn't worked so far. It's only been 2 years. I don't know if others can comment on that. How long does it take for a new class to really gain traction and start filling up? I don't know.
Anyone have a comment on that? Or alternative intro classes and how they've enrollments have responded?
This is Lee Fall at SUNY Oneonta. So I'm in central New York, part of the large New York State system. We also, as Chris mentioned, we also suffered low enrollments because there was a change in our gen ed class, and we actually, that's where we were getting our majors from. It is switching back there, actually adding science back into the general education, which should help. But we have noticed we offer 2 intro classes. One is Introduction to Geology, basically physical geology, and the other one is Science of Natural Disasters. And we are going to actually, both of them are fine for the majors to take, but we have noticed when we offered Science of Natural Disasters, we can get quite a few more students in that class from outside the department. So we're going to start offering that course more. But I think part of the draw there is the title, Natural Disasters, and that's what a lot of students seem to want to learn about, discussing volcanoes and earthquakes and that such. So we kind of have thought that sometimes just changing the title of the class can make a difference, and it could be geologic hazards. The students still don't know what that means. But natural disasters, they do seem to know.
In our last couple of minutes, anyone have any other follow-up on that?
This is Leslie Baker at the University of Idaho. This one thing that we've had some success with is, and it's dependent on how you do advising, but U of I centralized advising and brought in some professional advisors a few years ago. And we have a great relationship with our College of Science advisors, and we've successfully convinced them to reach out to the advisors in the humanities programs and encourage their students specifically to look at our introductory gen ed courses. And I've been watching carefully. We've done it particularly, we added a new online section of historical geology that's aimed at mostly at off-campus students, Idaho being a big state, but it's also of interest to students who are on campus but have course conflicts with the regular section. So we've been watching the enrollment in that carefully, and it really seems to be getting a bump from having some of the advisors encouraging students to consider it from outside our college.
Interesting. Any other last comments?
One question I'm wondering from your perspective, obviously historically there's a well-known correlation between numbers of majors and price of oil. I don't think in our case that's really the main driver for most of our majors, but based on what we've seen in terms of enrollments over the last several years, any thoughts on to what degree that might or might not be playing?
Yeah, we saw when we've looked at the data, we saw a decoupling about 10 years ago of that very long-term trend. You're dead right. It was absolutely in lockstep. We saw, like I said, a fair decoupling of it. What did happen with, sort of the explosion of production up on like the Bakken and the Eagle Ford and things like that is there was sort of this froth of additional majors that came in. They were almost all white men, which was interesting. It started to skew our demographics, but they were very, very price sensitive, and it was probably on the order of about 7,000 to 8,000 students that moved through over a couple years, and they have disappeared just as fast as they arrived. So there still seems to be some market response to oil trends, but in a lot of those cases, when we have talked to their employers and folks like that, these were individuals that just were able to measure that getting a geology degree was the quickest way to get on a rig and make a lot of money fast. I would say they were never intending to be, in the profession for the long haul. It was a means to an end, which is fine. But so there's still a response mechanism, but I'd say it's not nearly as strong as it was. I think there's still this long shadow of opinion that does, I think with oil sort of under pressure right now, there's probably some drag down in numbers based on that. The one thing that we have noticed though too is the on-campus numbers seem to be dropping. We're trying to get our arms around it, while the number of folks that are pursuing geo degrees through online programs, particularly as we have some of the major reputable universities offering them now, seems to be offsetting that decline. So there's sort of a demographic shift going on as well. So I think that's a bit of a drain on the on-campus experience for a lot of departments as well. So what I'd like to do is turn it back over to Pranoti for a minute. Pranoti, I don't know if you want any last words, but also maybe talk about the meeting in December, if you wanted to broach that subject to this community.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for a really lively discussion today. Some really good points and a lot of learning and sharing that went on. We have the AGU Heads and Chairs workshop is taking place in December in San Francisco. This is the Sunday before the beginning of the fall meeting. That would be on December 8th. If you're interested in attending that, we still have room for about 10 more folks. You should feel free to email me. If you are on the AGU Heads and Chairs community, we have I posted that several times on that community. In any case, if you have any questions about that workshop, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is pasher@agu.org.
Excellent. So in interest of everyone's time, we're right at our hour. Don't want to keep folks hanging. We have recorded this webinar, and we'll be making it available online if you want to go back and reference it or forward on to your colleagues. I would encourage you, if you want to continue discussions and post questions, I would suggest using that AGU Heads and Chairs online community as well. It's a good venue. I appreciate your time and cooperation, and hope to see you next month in our next webinar.